It feels like a lot of people are criticizing ESG right now. So I wanted to understand, how does ESG plays out in the context of venture capital? I've reached out to one of my friends at Daphni, he's the head of ESG, and asked for an interview. I'm on my way right now, but before that, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The episode starts now. Can you help me break it down? Obviously ESG came first as a big part of the large corporates, right? Like that was a big thing. It's now moving, I guess, downstream into startups and venture capital. What does it mean? Like ESG as part of a VC, like what are we talking about?
So to describe ESG, I would divide it into three parts. The first one is the governance that you have to implement within the management company, all the processes that you have to embed within the classical investment policies or processes that you have as an investor. It's also policies that you have to implement to content your final investors, to content the organization or the NGOs also that are, I would say, assessing the financial markets, and also the regulators. So you start with this big picture, and then you try to innovate and implement processes or even quick win within the fund and toward the investment process. What it means, it's before a portfolio company would be added to your portfolio, you have several steps to check, several steps to implement. And the idea is to add this extra financial lens with your financial or risk or opportunity or market research that you are doing when you are deep diving into a deal and doing all the due diligence. That's the first part.
And so just on that, so from a VC perspective, for example, is the governance of Daphni, for example, is it composed of diversity in terms of people, in terms of background? Like what's the topic there?
Yeah, so it's really true. It's the first topic to address. The VC ecosystem in France, and I think if you look worldwide, is really not diverse at all. The social side, the S side of ESG has not been addressed. It's been working on for the past decade. However, when you see the tenure of the people within the fund, it takes a long time to have new partners. If you want to have more diverse partners, even just to womanize the workforce and the partners, it takes a bit of time. So how we work is we have a North Star. We decided, for instance, to become a mission-driven company, which is the French legal status in France in 2021. And we assembled a mission committee with external experts, and they assess how we do things here as a VC, but also as a company. And then we decided also in 2022 to also address the S part for the management company to be certified B Corp. I think it's not the end game to be certified B Corp, but that's a really good tool if you want to dive deep into the processes and the practices that you have implemented, because they are asking you about stuff that maybe you never were aware of in the first place. So that's really an interesting framework to deep diving. And on this side too, on the management company side too, we decided to support some initiatives and to pledge also, like to make public commitments toward diversity within the workforce. For instance, we are supporting Included VC, which is a fellowship that was born in the UK and that aim to bring diverse background, diverse people into the VC world. And that's how we recruited 2 years ago the first person from this cohort. And we will recruit starting in next September someone from one of the new cohorts as well.
That's great. And Included VC is definitely a great organization. I have a lot of friends that are part of it. But going back to what you said on the assessment part,
Yeah.
so you're saying that there is another layer beside the financials when you invest in a company. What does that look like? Because obviously it's easy to talk about, milestone of revenue and whatnot, but in terms of diversity, in terms of governance, in terms of social, environmental, it's much harder. Like, what do we measure actually?
It really depends on the stage, I think, where you operate. We are a very early stage in the venture firm, so we are investing from seed to Series A, and soon to be maybe starting from pre-seed. We know when you are 4 founders or 2 people operating a company, it's okay to have nothing yet. We are here to help you, but we are assessing the willingness of the founder to implement in the future new policies, to look at their positive or negative externalities that they have. That's how we address ESG. And on another side, we have developed an impact rating methodology that we've made open source. It's available to download on our website, the tool and even the methodology, to assess the impact of the product or the service that the startup is delivering. The idea here is to focus on the outcomes of the products or the service, and to see if it has positive externalities and positive impacts on the SDGs, which are the Sustainable Development Goals made by the United Nations. And using those 2 frameworks, the one on the policies, on the willingness, the second one on the product or service, I think we have with those 2 tools our investment committee well prepared to make the final decision. And the idea to start really early, it's from deal flow origination when the deal flow is qualified, that we ask the investors to look into those topics. Because of course, ESG is not a matter of someone of compliance that's going to have a second thought or second look within the project. It should be part of the investment journey for all investors.
Couple of questions there. So you're talking about this assessment and willingness, but it makes me think only about the environmental parts, willingness to assess negative externality, for example, or like the impact of a product. What about the other 2?
So you're right. On the environmental parts, what's easier is that we have this common metric. We can talk about carbon footprint. We can talk about environmental policies. On the social and governance side, it's a bit harder. Nowadays, what's kind of funny is everything is part of ESG. If you deep dive into a company, its HR policy is part of ESG. Its data privacy management is part of the governance within the company. But if we talk about governance, which is also quite easy, is how the board is accountable for what the company is doing, how they are managing the relationship with the management, is also how the board has diversity as well. It's also if the board is assessing the ESG roadmap or having at least one ESG conversation or sustainability conversation with the portfolio company once a year to see the milestones and where it's headed on its side. So that's on the governance side, and you have also the cybersecurity and as I mentioned, the data privacy management that we also put on the governance side. And on the social side, you have several topics to talk about. First, you have the classical KPIs about the workforce, diversity within the workforce. In France, for instance, we talk a lot about mixity, parity, but we do not talk about how minority are addressed or ethnicity, because it's not something that you can easily do. That's the first part, is just what you're doing with your the jobs that you're creating. But I think that what really matters is also, are you taking into account your employees? So I think building an NPS, a Net Promoter Score, about using the feedback from your employee is something paramount on the social side of ESG. Taking into account also feedback review, onboarding, even offboarding is something that we are looking into. Training policies, that's everything that's part of the social side. And something else is also really important in VC is profit sharing. Do you have a policy to give or to offer within the packages, stock options, free shares? Usually it's market practice, because when we are sending a term sheet for a new investment opportunity, there is always a pool of stock option that is available for employees, and we are willing for the employees to all the employees to have access to capital, because that's how you align management and employees.
Something that caught my attention earlier that you said, and I'll pick your brain a little bit on that, but some VCs, even at pre-seed, they want to see already diversity in the founders. They want to see already a roadmap to impact. They want to see an assessment of the product. Like they go even much earlier into this type of conversation. And I think the idea behind it is to say, if you have a diverse set of funders, for example, it will reflect later in the company in its decision and all of that. Why do you believe that you can do it later?
I think it's too harsh to ask everything from the start for like a startup. Of course, we would like to have more women founders. Of course, we would like to have more diverse founders in our deal flow, and that's something we're going to talk about a bit later on. But I think what's really important is to build awareness within the portfolio company, within the startups. I think you can't ask them to have all the measurable KPIs if they have not built the product yet. If it's not at scale, if it's not something that is already commercialized, how can they measure it? So what we are doing, for instance, is that we are thinking about few KPIs that we think could be really interesting in terms of assessing the business model outside of the financial part, and we are mentioning them to the portfolio company, and then they can choose to build on that. Measuring its impact, it takes time usually. We have really good example in our portfolio. I don't know if you've ever came across Give, which is active in the sharing economy and make donation between people really easy. So it's quite clear the impact there, but it took time because there was no framework to assess it. They had to build their own methodology. So it took them a few years to have enough data from users to build use cases. So that's why we think it's not something that we're going to ask at pre-seed or seed. And then, of course, if the company is growing, they should implement stuff like this. So we will help them through their journey on that side to build those frameworks, those measurements, and those policies. We have built the tools to help them on this side.
Yeah, and I love Daphni for that, because you guys are very much open source on everything you do, which I think really helps the community. It's a good segue, I think, to the topic of today, which is a deep dive on the S, so the social part of ESG. I guess we can maybe cover it in 3 sections. The first one would be about what do you do at the company level, like management company level, meaning for Daphni itself. And then maybe we can go into the portfolio companies and in your investment practices as well. But let's maybe start at the company level. What does it mean?
Firstly, on the parity side, so we try to recruit as many men as women. Now the idea is to put parity also on top management, at the top management level, which is the hardest part, especially when your management company is co-founded by 2 men. But we're getting there, and that's improving. It takes time, but it works. Something really important that we do at the management company level is training on bias, cognitive bias. Everything that could be bias on social side, on social metrics. We have been, for instance, having NGOs that were helping us to open our mind on those bias that we had, because we all have bias and we have the tendency to recruit people like us.
Do you have example of that?
Yeah, for 2 months ago, we organized in the office with an NGO that we love and support through our endowment fund, Chapitre 2, a fresque. It's a fresque de la rue, but in English I think we say people from the streets, homeless people, precarity, people that are living in the precarity. And they destroyed all the stereotypes that we had on who are the person that have been in this living in the streets and being homeless. What does it mean? Why is it so hard to go out of this state? And this is an example that seems really far-fetched from what we are doing on day-to-day, but I think this is important to plant all those bricks to then build openness within the management company. And on top of that, as I mentioned, you have the framework of B Corp that's really useful because they are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you want to be the best in class, you have to work on some frameworks, on some policies to implement and to oversee. And then the fact that we are a mission-driven company and our mission statement is to leave the future, even if accelerating by the technology, but to have a positive impact on the social or environmental side through our investment, but also through our to all our stakeholders. So on all the events that we're organizing, that's why we are all about transparency and open source.
And from a VC perspective, can you actually reconcile all of that with performance as well? Because obviously what you don't want is a VC that underperform because one, it means that they will go out of business at some point because they won't be able to raise money.
Yeah.
And also because you want to make sure that this is not seen as a, let's do something good because we have to and it makes us look great, but rather like, hey guys, this is actually great for humanity in general, but also great for performance. So, maybe you want to tell me a few words about Time4?
First, I think in the past few years, we've seen some good literature on the listed asset side. Some institution and observatory, they have posted some good reports on how it affected the margin and profitability to have a diverse board and to have parity within the top management. This has been studied on the CAC 40 in France, and you've seen an improvement in margin twofold for those companies. So we have the proof. We have the proof on the listed asset side. We have also studies from the Big Four about an estimated premium at exits for companies that are incorporating ESG at core. Of course, it's a survey based on secondaries and private equity funds, but it still shows a 6% premium of intention. And I think that's a great incentive for also founders to take into account those topics. And to circle back to the Time4, the new investment fund that we are launching, we have not done the first closing yet, and we intend to do it before the summer. So it's we are getting there.
Good luck.
That's really a tough environment at the moment, but. What's really interesting in this fund is that we decided to address a glass ceiling in equity financing for entrepreneurs in France. What we've seen is that most of the entrepreneurs, they are coming from the 10 greatest schools. It's 70% or 60% of all the entrepreneurs that are raising funds, dilutive funds, that have been going into those schools. And we've also seen that founders coming from underserved area or lower income neighborhoods, they did not pass the screening of VC. And that's a blue ocean. It's 30% of the French population. And what we've seen with our partners, because what's interesting in this fund is that we are 4 ecosystems partners working together, 2 NGOs that are incubating impact projects within the region, within several cities in France. One is Les Déterminés, led by Moussa Camara, and the other is Live for Good, led by Jean-Philippe Courtois. Those 2 NGOs are on the field, which we are not. We are based in Paris, and that's how we are sourcing deal flow. And we intend to, and the fourth partner, I forgot to mention it, is HEC. It's really on the academic side. It's really interesting to have HEC because we all know that most of the founders, they are coming from HEC. And it's really great to have this business school that is trying to tackle the diversity topic on the funding. And so what we are aiming to do is to finance between 60 to 100 projects with a 100 million fund at the pre-seed stage with entrepreneurs coming from, as I mentioned, diverse backgrounds that do not have access to equity financing. And it's funny because when we were talking to few LPs, they said, if their project were great, they should have raised. We brought to the LP meetings a few entrepreneurs, and what they show is that they are 6 connections away from someone working in VC. So they are wasting time, energy, trying to find the right ecosystem. And sometimes they are, like some people send them to places that they can't reach. So they are even losing more time and they are defocusing on building their company. And that's really important to note because those projects deserve to raise as much as the classical do. And also those entrepreneurs, they are more resilient. They are fighting way more because they are putting all their resources within the company. They do not have assets from family own assets. So that's really a great project.
And I think, maybe tell me if I'm wrong on this one, but going at pre-seed for those companies, I think is really the main gap. And the reason why is we know that VCs look at each other very closely. So after pre-seed, you start to be on the radar of other people, other investors, I guess, because you've raised a pre-seed round. And if you do well, a lot of investors will look at you. But before that, you barely exist in the ecosystem, really. So is that the reason why you chose to go for pre-seed?
Yeah, that's the main reason. We want to attract co-investors within the deal as well, especially from the seed stage. But what we would love to is that the ecosystem would not need time for. Is that those entrepreneurs, they could knock at the door of any VCs and be regarded as much as every entrepreneurs. And I think that's a bit the aim. And if in 5 to 6 years, we see the deals that we're gonna assess really competitive, even at seed or pre-seed stage, I think we're gonna have fulfilled our mission. Well, I'm pretty sure 5 to 6 years is a bit hopeful on this side, but maybe in 10 years.
So next step, I guess, in the list is you've invested money in the company. You are now a shareholder and potentially board member. What's the playbook to actually implement this social aspect in a portfolio company?
That's where the fun begins. So we try to be very active investors. That's what VC do basically. And in our capacity buildings, on our capacity building side, we've decided to add the impact and ESG brick to the help that we provide to our portfolio company. So what we do is first, right after the closing, we organize an ESG session, impact session, to talk to the founders about what we're going to require for them. That's the first thing. But we are also talking to them about what we're going to offer to them. And I think that's where
what do you offer?
The most important part. What we offer is the right connection to the people that have been tackling those issues, the connection to scale-ups or companies that have been scaling through ESG at large. We offer resources, tools, guides, whatever you need to successfully implement those policies. We also have built a toolbox with all the ESG policies and actions that we think are important for seed stage company, for early stage company. because we think it's also important to have those milestones to raise further fundraising rounds. And that's basically how we work. We also offer our time if they want to have like a one-to-one workshop, to workshop with others fund or with other portfolio companies. We are always happy to help. We curated events and content dedicated to those topics to raise awareness on that. And we have a few times a year awareness campaigns that we are sending to all our funders with all the resources that we've built, with all the things that we're going to ask. And unfortunately for them, at the end of the year, we are also asking few KPIs that are mandatory for us to report to our LPs.
It's interesting because there's a lot of like policy, mandatory KPI, but I'm sure if you select the right funders, they will do it anyway.
Yeah, it's like what we do is that we've been assessing a pool of actions and policies that they could work on, not only on the social side, on the environmental side and the governance side, and what we are telling them that they can pick whatever topics mostly resonate within their company and their employees. We don't really care if they start to work on the environment side or the social side. We are fully aware that you can't do everything because that would be nonsense at your stage. And maybe when you're going to be a 300 company, you have the bandwidth to do it. But we mostly ask them what they want. And most of the founders, they are answering, where do we start? What do we start? What should we do? So they are willing, but they don't know how to address all those topics. They needed to be a bit guided there.
What's the usual answer to where do we start? What do you usually recommend?
Then we redirect them to our toolbox. That's going to be really soon open sourced, our ESG toolbox for portfolio companies. And we tell them to pick few topics that do not require any budget. Few topics that do not require any costs for the portfolio company.
Any example of that?
Yeah, for instance, it's really stupid, but if you are like a 15 people company and you have never done an employee survey, I think that's really something that you're missing. It's really important to assess how your staff is going, if they are going through hell, or if it's going really well within your culture. And usually we start on the social side, like how do you handle your onboarding with new employees? Are you letting your employees being reviewed or giving their feedback once a year on the performance? Do you ask them stuff on your vision? That's usually where we start. And depending on then which sector you are, we also would like and want the company to work on the cyber and data privacy management, especially as in Europe you have huge requirements. And on the environmental side, we ask them to implement quick win if they can. We know that the carbon footprint of the company will grow at the maturity and the product scale, and they're going to hire a lot of people. But the idea is just to contain this growth and to grow the carbon footprint less than the turnover.
What's your vision for the future? What will it look like in 10 years from now? If you were to predict it, or if you were to imagine the perfect world for ESG, what would that look like?
I think ESG should be embedded within every investor job posts. I think the investor will be more and more accountable for how they source new deals, how they are assessing them, and also how they act during how they are sitting at board level. I think that's where we are heading. They also need help to build this awareness. I don't think the ESG team within funds will outgrow and will really be something of lots of people. I think that's where we're heading, and I'd like also our investor to keep pushing for the laggards in the market to do more. I think it's the market should have like the practices, at least market standard that should be implemented by each fund. So I think in 10 years, maybe all of the funds will have someone in charge, and most of the work on the due diligence side and the assessment side would be done by the investors. And then on the sharing the policies and the ESG topics, the investors as well will be on the in the forefront.
And I like the idea of like calling out bad practices as well. I think something that I see more and more in impact is that sometimes it feels a bit restrictive. Like, for example, a lot of funds have their carry linked to the impact. And I sometimes wonder why it's not the other way around. People that are actually do not care about the environment, for example, they don't have any restriction on their carry, just like based on money. I think sometimes we see things from a different perspective.
That's really a good point. One of the companies that we still have was always terrified and like really sad about the fact that its investors for due diligence were always asking the company to justify its impact. And the CEO always told us, but why don't we ask the same to the other companies? Why should I justify everything I do to get fundraising when the companies that have the most harmful negative impact, we do not ask them anything?
Yeah, that I think sometimes we are not doing always the right thing. I think it's a good incentive. It's a good idea. It comes from the right places, but sometimes it's just that the implementation of it is probably not the best. But look, we're getting towards the end of this episode. We have one more section, which is the fire questions. You'll have 1 sentence maximum to answer about 10 questions in the next 5 minutes. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Great. What's the biggest misconception about ESG in venture capital?
Treating it as compliance.
Do you think the environmental part, social part, or governance part matters most? Which one of those 3?
I think in 10 to 15 years, environmental parts will be really critical, depending on which scenarios of global warming we are reaching.
You are not an investor, but you see a lot of investment at the fund. What's a green flag you love to see in an early stage startup?
I think one of the green flag is when the founders are asking the first ESG question.
What's a red flag that, on the opposite side, concerns you?
One, if the portfolio companies would agree to everything we say on ESG and say, we're going to implement everything within few months, I would say, okay, you are just trying to do a tick the box exercise.
I love this one. What's one mistake VCs often make when trying to integrate ESG as part of their practices?
I think one of the mistakes is to start from the reporting, the regulatory one, and trying to put all the regulatory thing within your investment process. I think that's the worst idea you can have.
Is there a founder you admire for their commitment to the social aspects?
We've mentioned him already, but I think Moussa Kamara with Les Déterminés and what he's done with incubating all those projects from underserved area, I think it's really amazing.
What's the best innovation you've seen in the climate space since you've joined Daphni?
The best innovation is something linked to the garment industry. It's something that's linking depollution, decarbonation, and less energy intensive to dye our garments. And I think it's really amazing, all the co-benefits it has.
Do you have the name of the company? Can you say?
The name of the company is Everdye.
Okay, great. 3 most important things to be a successful impact VC, although you're not an impact VC yourself, but you've seen a lot.
I think the first is to be pragmatic. So it's okay if the portfolio company doesn't have built yet all the tools and the framework they need to. Do not forget that they have to build a company as well, not only impact. And the ideal world is to scale impact and not to have just tiny regional impact. That's the first one. The second one is do not forget to help entrepreneurs not only on impact and ESG. VCs, they have a great and tremendous network. I think that's the great strength of VCs, and you should help your companies on all the aspects of their business, not only on ESG. And I think the last one would be on reporting. Your LP is going to ask a lot. Do not forget that you can answer half of the question by yourself.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Hugo.
Great discussion. I think we learned a lot about what it takes to implement ESG practices. And listeners, if you like this episode and if you like the show, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube, or give us a 5-star review and follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.